Good morning. Welcome to another program of Study the Word. This is sponsored every week by the Kirkwood Church of Christ that meets at 948 South Geyer Road in Kirkwood, Missouri. We're glad you've joined us again this week. We have a number of regular viewers. If you're new to this program, we deal with a Bible question every week and we provide a Bible answer. The reason the phone number is up there right now is if you have a Bible question, you've always wanted to know what the Bible has to say about it, please let us know. And we can use it on this program. We upload all our past TV programs to our website. You can jot it down. It's right there. And you can search through the archives and look at all those hundreds and hundreds of Bible questions and find the Bible answer. I put the phone number up for a much longer period of time at the end of every program. That gives you plenty of time to jot it down or even type it into your phone, because we have a number of free Bible study helps that we offer to folks. And we mean free. And we're not wanting anything from you. We don't want a contribution. We want to encourage you folks, as the name of this program is, to study the Word. Open up the Bible and learn. Okay, so what is our question for this week? Our question is simply this. Why was Jesus killed? When you read through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you see that Jesus loved everybody, it's the reason why he came, it's the reason why the Father sent him, for God so loved the world. So the Father sent the Son. Do you think that Jesus doesn't love people? Well, of course. And he taught the importance of love. But my point is, with Jesus being such a good person who never sinned, why would anybody want to kill him? Now we know that that was all part of the plan that Jesus would come and would die. He mentioned it a number of times during his earthly ministry that he was going to die. You can go to Mark 9, verse 31, for example, and he foretold and said that, I've come, I'm going to die, and then I'm going to resurrect 3 days later. He mentioned that a number of times. Matthew, I wrote down a couple of these passages for you to jot down if you wanted to look at them at your own time. But in Matthew 16 and verse 21, and also in Luke 24 and verse 46, and a number of other places, Jesus said he was coming to die. But please keep in mind that even though Jesus was going to be crucified and a lot of good things were accomplished, the shedding his blood meant that we could have the remission of sins, the fact that he purchased the church with his own blood, and that he would resurrect and conquer death and give us a hope. But we need to keep in mind that Jesus did not make people kill him. Man still had free will. We know that because of over in Acts chapter 2, when the first sermon was preached after Jesus went back to heaven. Do you know that the Apostle Peter, because it wasn't too long ago before this that Jesus was crucified, at the climax of his sermon, he actually mentions this in verse 36 of Acts 2. Therefore let all the house of Israel know assuredly that God has made this Jesus whom you crucified, both Lord and Christ. They crucified him. They killed him. So what we're going to do in today's program is look at a few. I'm sure we don't have time to look at all the examples where it said that they were going to seek to kill Jesus. And in the text, it tells us why. Because that's our question today. Why did they want Jesus killed? Well, let's look at a few. The first one we're going to look at is over in John the 11th chapter. John chapter 11. And when we're studying about why Jesus was killed, we're basically learning the motives. And when you learn a little bit about that, we're going to find that mankind really hasn't changed. So in Matthew chapter 11, and I know it says it in verse 53, so we're going to have to back up a little bit because let's pick it up in verse 45. It says that many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him. some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things Jesus did. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, "What shall we do? For this man works many signs." So they're acknowledging the abilities that Jesus has. But here's their fear. Verse 48. "If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe him." Well, what would be wrong with that? Well, they didn't want that. It says, "And the Romans will come and take away our place and the nation." And one of them, Caiaphas, being a high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation should perish. Now this he did not say on his own authority, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. And not only for that nation only, but also that he would gather together in one the children of God who were scattered abroad." Well, verse 53, "Then from that day on, they plot him to put him to death." Well, then why? Okay, so we're answering, why would they want to put him to death? I mean, they succeeded in doing that, crying out to Pilate and getting the people to say, "Crucify him, crucify him." The religious leaders of that time, they clearly illustrate to you and me, as we read through this, that they were not interested in the truth. They were not interested in the fact that Jesus could perform miracles. And the reason Jesus performed miracles is so that the people would be convinced who he was. And we read earlier in this text is that because of the things that Jesus did, they believed in him. And that's what we're to do. We're to believe in Jesus. We are to follow Jesus. We're not to follow some man or some organization. And we stress that over and over. I'm not ever trying to get anybody to be converted to some church. That's just people. You need to be converted to Christ. But so often is the case, people don't want to follow Christ because they have their own ambitions in mind, things that they want. And when that happens, you don't see the good that is there. And it kind of relates to some of these other examples that we have in the scriptures. I'm just going to back up now to the 5th chapter, John chapter 5. And we'll look at yet another one. And the specific verse that mentions this is verse 18. And of course, then we'll back up. And so, let's notice verse 13. I'm in John chapter 5. "But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, a multitude being in that place." So Jesus had told a man in a couple of verses before this, "Take up your bed and walk." And he did. So it says in verse 14, "Afterwards Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, 'See, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest the worst thing come upon you.' The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. For this reason," did you get this? "For this reason the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him because he had done these things on the Sabbath." Now Jesus had not broken the Sabbath. They're man-made laws, of course. They're saying that shouldn't have been done. You can think of times where Jesus rebuked them by saying, "What do you mean? If an oxen falls into a ditch, will you not help it out, even though it's the Sabbath? And here I am healing somebody on the Sabbath. What have I broken? What law have I broken?" See, Jesus did live under the old law, and he had to keep the Sabbath. Many of the other laws that were under the Old Testament. So Jesus never sinned. Keep that in mind. He never transgressed. So wait a second. So they sought him the more to kill him because he broke the Sabbath. And not only that, if we read a little bit further, it says, he not only broke the Sabbath, but he also said that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. Okay? Well, they didn't want to believe that. See, another reason why they wanted to kill him and why people get angry is when they hear things that they don't believe. And that happens all the time. Even today, people get angry. You point out false teaching. Our program obviously stirs up controversy. When you preach the truth on things and you give people a Bible answer when other religious groups are not teaching that, of course people are going to be upset. I understand that. Doesn't make it right. You would just hope that people would see the truth and want to turn and accept it. These people, you're learning here, folks, what happens when people are full of hate. They could not see any good in Jesus. That's why they wanted him crucified. And the fact that Jesus was the Son of God and that he made himself equal with God, John 1 and verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then, of course, he became flesh, verse 14 of John chapter 1. Again, we're learning more about mankind in the first century of why Jesus was killed. And for you and I, we might say, well, that's not a reason to have somebody killed if you just disagree with what they're doing. You know, they're not doing them any harm. How did healing a man who was lame harm the religious leaders of that day? I mean, personally, did it affect them? Well, it affected them in the sense where people were starting to believe Jesus. Okay, well then that meant they were losing their followers. You see, it has to do with power. A lot of people are more interested in controlling people or having that authority, that power, and rather than to accept what the truth is. And we'll look at a couple more. I'm over in the book of Mark now. I'm going to go to the third chapter, and you're going to see a lot of overlap as far as attitudes when it comes to the reasoning that these people had in wanting to put Jesus to death. And so Jesus foretelling that this would happen didn't mean that he made it happen. There's a difference between knowing something will happen and make it happen. Jesus came at a time of knowing how people would respond to him. His purpose was to come and die, which we mentioned earlier at the beginning of our program. That Jesus was going to come, suffer, be crucified, be buried, and rise again the third day, and then ascend back into heaven. Mark chapter 3. I'm going to begin reading in verse 1. Listen to this. And he entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a withered hand. And they watched him closely, whether he would heal on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. Then he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Step forward." And he said to them, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill?" Well, that's a good one. See, Jesus calls this man, he's got the withered hand. And then he tells the Jews that are there, he's saying, well, you know, what's lawful here? To do good or evil on the Sabbath? And I like what it says here, like to save a life or kill a life. What's lawful? It said, but they kept silent. They didn't want to answer. So they were just watching him to see what he might do, try to catch him. In verse 5 it says, so when he had looked around at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, that's what we've been talking about, he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. Verse 6, then the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. Well, why? Why did you want to destroy him? Well, remember, Jesus was upset because he was about to do something really good. He's going to help this man with the withered hand. It should be a time of rejoicing, a time of recognizing the power of our Lord and wanting to believe in him. But what did they do? They just wanted to catch him at something, and they couldn't see the good. And they wanted to destroy this man. Why? Because he was doing good things? Well, it wasn't just that he was doing good things that upset them. Is that it was causing other people to believe in him. And not only that, they weren't believing in him. And they didn't want to. And how sad that is. When people are presented with the truth, and there's no arguing against it, what are you going to do? Well, you either accept it or you become hard-hearted. And that's how Jesus described them in this text. Now I'm going to go over to another passage over in the book of John. We have time for a couple more, I think. But over in John, the 12th chapter, I'm going to pick it up in verse 9. It says, "Then a great many of the Jews knew he was there, and they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. But the chief priests took counsel that they might also put Lazarus to death." Also. What do you mean also? Well, they want to put Jesus to death, but they also want to put Lazarus to death. Verse 11. "Because on the account of him, many of the Jews went away and believed in Jesus." Do you see that? So Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. And they're thinking, okay, not only do we need to kill Jesus, but we also need to kill Lazarus, because Lazarus is a walking example of his power and the great thing that he did, and that people might turn and follow him. You see, they're more interested in having people follow them than to follow the Lord or to accept the truth. And how sad that is. People can get so full of pride, not willing to accept what the Word of God has to say. Yeah, the Word of God. See, the Old Testament that these Pharisees would have been schooled in, they knew a Messiah was coming someday, but they didn't want to accept this Messiah. Well, why didn't they want this Messiah? Because Jesus was coming, and it was one of our previous ones, that they found out that Jesus was coming for all people. And again, they didn't like that. They wanted to remain special. And that's another reason why they wanted him crucified. It doesn't justify it, folks. We understand that. And something good came out of something really bad. I mean, here's Jesus who did nothing wrong, but he was going to go to the cross and die and pay our debt, the penalty for sin. That's another lesson which I think it's going to tie into next week's Bible question. I will give you a heads up on that as I'm turning over here to, let's see. I'm going to go back to John the 5th chapter. There was a couple of examples in there. We looked at one in verse 18, but I'm going to, I want to back up a little bit on that one. But again, to give you a heads up on next week, how the previous point ties into this, we're going to talk about what is redemption. And we're going to link that with Jesus' death. And so if Jesus doesn't die and resurrect, if you have time, because I just did a bulletin article on this for this week, but in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, if you get a chance to read that, jot that down. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, read the whole chapter. But the first half of the chapter, he talks about the importance of Jesus dying on the cross and his resurrection. And he also talks about, well, what does it mean if Jesus doesn't resurrect? And there's a lot of serious consequences if he doesn't. But the flip side of that is, because he did resurrect, look at all the positives that are there. And again, we're going to talk more about that next week. So we hope you'll tune in each and every week. Lord willing, we'll answer that question next week. Okay. So we were talking a little bit earlier about this John chapter 5 passage, where they were seeking to kill him. We had made mention of verse 18, where it said, "Therefore the Jews sought all the more to kill him because he healed on the Sabbath." And that seems to be like almost like a broken record over and over again. They're more interested in looking at what day of the week that Jesus was performing this miracle, and it happened to be on the Sabbath. And as we've already stressed, and he mentioned this a little bit earlier up in the text, what transgression took place. Now, there were restrictions on the Sabbath. There's no question about no working on the Sabbath, okay? But Jesus performing that miracle, and like I said earlier, when he posed the question to them, if an ox falls into a ditch on the Sabbath, are you going to leave it there, or are you going to take it out? Logic tells you that you would take it out, and they would too, but they never wanted to answer. And that's Jesus is the master teacher on this. This is what I love about Jesus. And if you'll notice, I didn't do it. But in all those passages, if you wrote them down, something interesting happened at the end of all those texts that we have there. And one of them is, I'll turn back to, I'm going to go to the John 11 one quickly, because this is a phrase that is repeated over and over again. And I think it's in 53. Yes, okay. So 53 said of John 11, then from that day on, they plotted to put Jesus to death. Now look at verse 54. And this happens a lot in all those examples that we gave. It said, therefore Jesus no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there into the country near the wilderness to the city. The point is, not only that they were plotting to kill him and it wasn't time yet, and so Jesus would avoid certain situations when they were going to come and take him. It wasn't until in the garden, and you read about that in Matthew 26. How are we doing on time? Doing okay. The thing I wanted to point out is, it got to the point where they didn't want to answer Jesus anymore. Remember, he would always ask a question. That's what a master teacher does. And there's a problem when people don't want to answer the question. You can answer a question with a question. They would, we've studied that. There are times they came to Jesus by saying, by what authority are you doing these things? And Jesus said, okay, I'll tell you if you tell me this. And so he asked them a question, and they would not answer his question. So he said, well, I'm not going to answer your question. And so when they tried to catch Jesus at something, it got to the point where they said they stopped questioning him. Well, of course they stopped questioning him. You don't want to know why? Because they couldn't answer him, and they didn't want to listen to the answer. There are times when people ask questions when they're really not interested in the answer. They're just trying to catch them in their own words. And that's what they tried to do with Jesus, but he was the master teacher. I think we're learning a lot today in our lesson, as our time winds down, about the way people not only treated Jesus, but the way they treat people today who are trying to stand up for the truth. When it's not what they believe, they don't like it. And if they find that people are being influenced to believe what's being taught, it makes them even more upset. Do you know one of the things I've learned about religions of today? Most religious leaders today don't mind if you disagree with them. Most don't mind. But they do mind when you're telling people what they're teaching is wrong. See, it bothers them. And so with Jesus, not only did he stand for the truth, but he was exposing the false teaching of the scribes and of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which they did not like. And that's what happens when you tell the truth. Truth exposes error. It's like light exposes that which was in darkness. And we need to be mindful of the motives behind that. Why do I say that? Because if you have time, go to Hebrews chapter 6. When you transgress, you know what it says there? It says when you transgress, it's like you're crucifying Jesus over again. And so would you have acted like these individuals and had Jesus crucified? Well, you're kind of guilty of doing that if you transgress and you don't do anything about it. It's like you're hammering the nails into his hands and his feet. We need to be mindful of this. And so learning more about Jesus, learning more about the Word is what this program's all about, and the things that we offer. So let me begin by offering you this first thing that so many people, every week, I think without exception, maybe 6 years ago early on when we were just starting this program, there was the odd Sunday where people didn't call in, but almost every week people call in and request the 6-lesson home Bible study course. Would you like this first lesson mailed to you? No cost. Well, what do I got to do? Well, take your Bible and you open it up, you read the verses, answer the Bible questions. Well, then what? Well, you're going to put this in the envelope we provide. It'll come back, look it over, and we'll give it back to you. So you can hold on to it for future reference. And then we're going to put lesson number 2 in there. Like I said, there's only 6. It doesn't take long to go through this. But folks, don't quit after the first one. And so many people don't even send the first one in, which is unfortunate because there's so many valuable lessons once you get past 1 that teaches you about the church and salvation and so many things about sin and heaven. So if you would like this first lesson mailed to you, please let us know. Leave your name and your address. If it's on voicemail, it's really good when you spell it out. When you text it, of course, that's easier. Some of them have been very difficult to figure out. So please leave your name and your address, and we'll get that first lesson in the mail to you first thing tomorrow. And what we could put in with that, no charge, are these 2 pamphlets. Well, what are they? We call them the 40-30. Well, what's the 40-30? 40 things that people are teaching that they say this is in the Bible when they're not. And there's a list of 30 things that they're saying, oh, it's not in the Bible, when they really are in the Bible. So you might want to look at those. And again, we can put it in with your first lesson. No charge for any of these things, please. We don't want an offering. The third thing we can do is we can put you on the mailing list for this weekly bulletin. We mail it out every couple of weeks with 2 bulletins, and it doesn't take long. It's 2 short articles, and it might take you 5 minutes to read, but it just adds to your knowledge. And so that can come to your home every couple of weeks. If you'd like to be put on the mailing list for that, please mention it. And as I mention every week, you don't have to mention, I want the course, I want the pamphlets, I want the bulletin. If you want all 3, just say, I would like all 3. And I know exactly what that means. Now, the fourth thing that we offer, we can't mail this out, but it's an opportunity to have a one-on-one Bible study, a face-to-face. And folks, presently we're in 5 different libraries in the St. Louis area. And we just let you know that if there's a library near you, if you feel comfortable, we can meet there. We have studies in people's homes, and we meet some places at the church building. We have some classes. But if you would like a one-on-one study, please let us know, and we'll arrange it around your schedule. We're more flexible, and we can meet during the week or on the weekends, afternoons or evenings. If you're a lady by yourself, we'll bring somebody with us so you won't feel uncomfortable. Bring another lady, and we'll open up our Bibles together. And you know what we're going to do. We're going to study the Word. That's what this program's all about. And folks, if you're ever in the Kirkwood area, please come by and visit with us. The church meets every Sunday morning at 9:30 for a Bible study. 10:20 we start our hour of worship, and then an hour of worship in the afternoons from 5 to 6. We have a midweek Bible study every Wednesday from 7 to 8, and classes for all age groups. And just come by. We've had so many visitors that say they've been watching the program, and it's really given us a shot in the arm. We really appreciate it. Come by and say hello, observe, and participate. So tune in next week, because we're going to come together. We're going to open up our Bibles, and we are going to study the Word. Thank you, folks, and have yourselves a great day.